There is a moment that happens slowly, and most people never catch it. You step outside, maybe into your backyard, maybe onto a porch, and somewhere nearby, a bird keeps eating. A squirrel doesn't move. A deer at the edge of the tree line holds its position for just a second longer than you'd expect before it decides what to do next. It feels like nothing. It looks like nothing, but something just happened. That pause, that brief, almost invisible decision is not random. It is the result of weeks, sometimes months, of something building between you and the animals around your home. And most people move right through that moment without realizing what it means. Let's start with what you've probably noticed, without naming it. When you first begin spending time in a yard, or start a feeder, or just sit outside regularly, the animals treat you the way they treat everything unfamiliar, which means they leave. A bird lands, sees you shift your weight, and it's gone before you fully registered it was there. A squirrel freezes on a branch, makes a calculation, and scrambles up and away. The space around you feels empty, reactive, like the air's pushing things back. This is not shyness. It is something more precise than that. Wild animals are running a constant risk assessment, not emotionally, not in the way we experience fear, but mechanically. Every object in their environment gets categorized: safe, unknown, threat. Anything unknown gets treated as threat until proven otherwise. And a human being, with our upright silhouette and our unpredictable movements and the strange way we smell, starts in the threat category. That's just where we begin. So the distance you feel when you first sit outside is real. The space the animals keep between themselves and you is not accidental. It is calibrated. They are not ignoring you. They are managing you. Now here's where it begins to shift. You keep showing up. Same time, same spot. Same behavior. Maybe you fill a feeder on Tuesday morning. Maybe you sit with a coffee on the same steps every evening. Maybe you move through the yard, doing the same tasks in roughly the same order. You don't think about this as a pattern. To you, it's just routine. But routine is exactly what changes everything. Animals that live in or around a fixed territory have extraordinary memory for patterns. Research into bird cognition, particularly corvids like crows and jays, but also many songbirds, has shown that they track the behavior of individuals over time. Not just movement, but timing, consistency. What follows what? They are building a model of you. Not a conscious one, not a narrative the way we'd tell a story, but a behavioral map. This human appears. This human does these things. This human does not chase, does not lunge, does not disrupt. At some point, you shift from unknown to something else. You don't become safe. That word is too simple. You become predictable. And in the language of wildlife, predictable is the closest thing to safe that actually matters. This is the part most people miss, because the change is not dramatic. It doesn't happen the day a bird lands near you for the first time. It doesn't arrive in a clear, obvious moment. What changes first is the quality of the pause. Before recognition, animals leave quickly. They see you, process you as unknown, and the departure happens in a fraction of a second, instinct completing itself without hesitation. After consistent exposure, something else starts to happen. There's a pause before the decision. The bird looks at you, stays, looks again, and then either stays or goes. But the choice is happening now instead of the reflex. The squirrel that used to scramble now sits and watches you for a 3 count before it decides the branch is fine. That pause is everything. That is recognition happening in real time. What you are seeing is an animal pulling from memory rather than instinct alone. This human, this silhouette, this predictable creature, I have a file on this. Let me check it before I react. And the file, more often than not, comes back clear. This mechanism has a name in behavioral ecology. It's called individual recognition. and it is far more widespread in the animal kingdom than most people realize. We tend to imagine that the natural world is driven almost entirely by instinct. Stimulus, response, repeat. And instinct is genuinely foundational. But layered on top of instinct, in species after species, is the capacity to remember individuals and update behavior based on that memory. Crows are the most documented example. Studies have shown that crows will recognize a specific human face, remember whether that person posed a threat or ignored them, and pass that information to other crows in their group. A crow that was captured and banded by a researcher will respond to that researcher, that specific face, with alarm calls, while showing no particular reaction to strangers. They remember. They hold the memory across seasons, and they modify their behavior accordingly. But this is not only crows. American robins show similar patterns. Urban foxes develop detailed maps of which humans are passive and which are not. Deer that live near homes build up tolerance profiles. This yard, these people, this routine, the size of the flight zone, the distance at which an animal chooses to move away, contracts over time with non-threatening exposure. Your yard has become a data set, and the animals in it are running continuous updates. There is another layer to this, and it connects to something even larger. When a single animal in a social group or territory recognizes you as non-threatening, that information can move outward. This is partly direct. Other animals observe the one that isn't fleeing and recalibrate. But it's also something more subtle than that. Wildlife habituates not just to individuals, but to zones of consistent safety. A pair of cardinals that have built their pattern around your feeder for 2 seasons is not just familiar with you. They are familiar with the space itself, the branch they land on first, the angle from which they assess the yard, the time of day when things are predictable. That territory becomes a kind of anchor point, and other birds learn from their presence that this zone is low risk. You have, without meaning to, created a behavioral field, a region where the cost of staying is lower than it would be elsewhere, and that field extends slightly outward, slightly beyond what you can see from where you sit. Animals at the edge of your property, species you may rarely notice, are also taking note of the patterns at the center of it, the stillness you feel in a yard where you've spent consistent calm time. That is not just atmosphere, it is structure. It is information that has been distributed through a network of animals making decisions based on your behavior. You may have noticed at some point that something felt different. Not louder exactly, not more active, but more present. Like the yard had become more itself somehow. Birds singing closer than before, a squirrel sitting in full view, moving through its routine without monitoring your position. The sense that you had been quietly let into something you didn't have access to before. This is what it feels like when you have moved, in the perception of the animals around you, from unknown to accounted for. They are not tame. They are not trusting in the way a dog trusts. The wildlife around a yard that has reached this point is still wild, still running risk assessments, still alert, still ready to recalibrate the moment something changes. But the baseline has shifted. Your presence is now priced in. You are part of the model they run to navigate their territory. And the model says, this one is consistent. This one holds still. This one does not cost us anything. Here is what is worth sitting with. The recognition goes in both directions, even if only one side knows it consciously. You have been learning the animals too, their timing, their roots, which branch they favor, which sound means alarm and which means nothing. You have been building your own map of the territory, your own pattern of who arrives when and what follows what. The difference is that your map is conscious and theirs is behavioral. But both maps have been built from the same material, repeated careful attention to what actually happens in a specific place over time. This is something that has become genuinely rare. Not the wildlife, the attention, the willingness to be consistently present without forcing an outcome. Most of our time in the natural world is transactional. We move through it on our way somewhere. We observe it briefly before something else demands our attention. We treat it as backdrop. But the animals that have begun to recognize you did so because you stopped being transactional. You became a feature of the landscape, reliable, present, non-threatening. And landscapes that have reliable, non-threatening features in them become richer, more populated, more layered, more alive in that specific felt way that is hard to name but obvious when you are inside it. There is one more thing. Because the recognition is real, it is also fragile in a particular way. Not easily broken, years of consistent behavior create a deep tolerance that survives minor disruptions, but fundamentally dependent on the thing that built it. Your continued predictability, a yard left for a season without the feeder, without the presence, without the routine, that doesn't erase what was built, but it does allow it to soften. The animals don't forget exactly, but the model gets less current, and they return to slightly greater caution until the pattern reasserts itself. Then it comes back faster than it was built the first time, because something like memory is still in the system. This is worth knowing because it means the relationship, if you can call it that without overstating it, is ongoing. It is not a state you achieve and hold. It is something you maintain through presence, through the same quiet behavior that built it, through continuing to be the predictable, non-threatening element in a landscape that needs those elements more than it ever has. The next time you step outside and something doesn't move away from you, pause before you take it for granted. What you are seeing is not passivity. It is the result of weeks of data, carefully collected by a nervous system far more attentive than we usually give it credit for. It is an animal that has run the calculation and decided that the cost of staying is acceptable. That you, specifically, are acceptable. That is a small thing. And it is not a small thing at all. The world just outside your door is paying attention to you in ways that are structured, remembered, and continuously updated. You have always been part of that system. You just may not have known it was running.